Hello, and welcome back to Morning into Dancing, the show inspired by the grace of God in action in my life as I have learned and grown after a childhood spent in an abusive and reclusive cult. I took the name of this show from Psalms 30, verse 11, where it says, "Thou hast turned for me my mourning into dancing." God's grace helps us turn our mourning, our grieving, our trials, our troubles into dancing and joy and strength. And it helps us rejoice for our trials, which sometimes never let up and never go away. I mean, you've got Rocky Balboa on my wall right there behind you saying, "The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows." And he says this in the movie Rocky Balboa. It's a very mean and nasty place. And I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. That's a pretty grim look on the world. Except for that it ends up with, or it goes more optimistic. You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. And that's just true. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. And then he says that's how winning is done. Well, that's how life is done. Life is the difficulties, the trials, the challenges, they are not a glitch, as we talked about in the last episode. They are a feature of this whole thing. And my life in this dumb cult basically gave me a unique origin story, right? I mean, I could look at it as, boy, I was robbed, and accurate, right? Of a normal childhood with parents. Many families, many kids are being robbed of that. So it wasn't unique in that area. The cult setting was somewhat unique. But in any case, the point is that I don't want us to act like the bad things that happen in our lives have to somehow turn good. I'm not saying look for a silver lining in everything. I'm saying that God is real and his grace is there. Essentially, our spiritual healing factor. Do you know how if you get a cut on your finger, it heals eventually? Do you know how if you get surgery on your shoulder, which I did a few months ago, it takes some time and it takes some work, but we do heal overall. Most of us do. That's the normal default biological state of people, that we have a healing process in our lives. And it's this whole beautiful, amazing, complex system, right, of healing and improving. I believe that grace is the spiritual healing factor for our lives. And I'm not saying, again, that silver linings all the time, or turn your, ashes into beauty, or turn your frown upside down, because bad things happen. And it is not fair, nor is it really correct, to say that I can make those bad things good. But we can see that good can come from bad, right? We can become strong through adversity. It doesn't change that it was bad. And I think that for some people, maybe they are able to get to the point where they can say, it was good that it was bad. And that's fine. And for me, I wouldn't change a thing. I am glad of who I am today, and I would not change anything because I like this beautiful journey that Heavenly Father's grace has helped me be on. That does not change the fact that it was bad, though, right? The fact of its badness, its actual empirical badness, is a foundation on which I could jump off of, or a diving board, right? Because my foundation's on the rock of Jesus Christ. But a diving board or a springboard into something better. So it's a lot of talk about how I don't believe in what some people call toxic positivity. I don't think that's a real thing. I think that it is appropriate to seek positivity. I think it's appropriate to boost positivity. I think it's very important for us to see the real, see the bad, and at the same time acknowledge there can be good. To have nuanced thoughts in our heads. I've got the window open. It's a little warm in here, so I apologize for any ambient noise you're hearing. But I'm not closing that window. It's gotten warm in here. So we can have nuanced, complex thoughts in our head, and a lot of the world is trying to make us think that we can't. Don't fall into that. So this episode is landing in the best small town. All that lead up is because I had a crappy childhood, but there were a lot of good things that came from it. And part of it was what I talked about in the last episode about being in Faith Canyon and being able to, learn some things and find a peace and a quiet somewhere in me, and also my sister with her love. So The circumstances of my arrival in Kanab, Utah, were simply that I was driven there. And I think I was dropped off in Best Friends by Mark or Steven or something. And my father met me up there. And a few of my boxes that I'd packed up in the previous episode, I think all my boxes were actually there because they completely closed down the Dallas branch. But my bike wasn't there. It had somehow gotten lost in transit. And so everything else was there, though, which is great. It turned out really well. And we transported it down to my father's house. He was living with his wife, Evelyn at the time. She goes by Susan now. They've since divorced. It's too bad. And their daughter, Emma. I moved in 91. I graduated in 92, right? Went to Kanab High School. I got there the day my senior year began. So I actually didn't go to school that day. The next day we went and registered me, and I started school a day or two later. So I think I actually went to school on a Monday, but I think school had started on like a Tuesday or Wednesday. Anyway, so I went to school, and I didn't have my own room or anything like that. I still hadn't had my own room ever. I would unroll a thinnish futon on the floor of the living room where my dad and his wife, my stepmom, and my sister lived. It was a very small house. It was a small two-bedroom house, older, with a bit of a backyard and a bit of a front yard. They had a dog or two. They probably had a cat, I'm guessing. I don't know. So I didn't really have my own space there. It was definitely a temporary, transitory experience there. But, I ate dinner with them sometimes. Not much, but a few times. A couple of Sundays, I think it was. But otherwise, I was kind of on my own. Yeah, it was interesting. I got a job pretty quick. So it turned out that at some point in Best Friends Animal Sanctuary's history, they decided that they wanted to have more of a presence in town. So Hope, this kind of deep, rich voiced woman who talked like this, very deep and resonant in her tone, and she talked like this. I was Hope. She went by Mother Greer before and after that, but she opened a thrift shop in Kanab, and it was a storefront, a glass storefront, and thrift stuff and some Best Friends merchandise, which is kind of interesting. I think this was the beginning of the Best Friends merchandise thing. But at the back of the store was this just sitting area with a couple of old couches and a microwave. And behind that, there was like a kitchenette or something. And then there was a basement there. It was kind of like a dungeon. Anyway, this is all important because I landed there, and for some reason I went and got a job at Best Friends thrift store. I think I hit it off with Hope or something, but Michael Mountain had opened it and Hope was running it. Michael Mountain was a real quirky dude. But I got a job there. I was the cashier there for a while and worked for Best Friends for a bit. That was my first sort of job. I was not technically and legally an employee there. I think the statute of limitations is long past. I didn't make a lot of money. Before the end of my senior year, I was already working at The Junction, which was a local fast food restaurant, really great burger joint. Now it's called Big Al's at The Junction or something like that. In any case, I worked at Best Friends, and what was really some wonderful graces that happened was that before I moved to Kanab, one of my better friends growing up was a guy named Timothy, tall guy, 6'2", 6'3", I don't know, 6'1". He was taller than me. I'm not that tall. I'm like 5'9" and change maybe on a good day in the morning. He had moved there before me, and he had already graduated, but he was living in downtown Kanab. He was renting his own place, and he had a job and was working and stuff. He was doing okay. He'd had a girlfriend already by the time I lived there, but he'd also made some friends. And it turned out most of the friends that he'd made were with people who were still in school. And a couple of them were seniors in school, and some of them were juniors, a year younger than me. So he had these friends, and they had interests that like Tim had, which was games, tabletop games, and board games, and D&D. And then other cool role-playing games like Shadowrun and other cool stuff, right? So they were playing games together before I even got there. And so I, of course, connected with Tim because he's my boy, right? And that meant that I immediately got adopted by a group of weird, quirky, eccentric friends. Like, really cool guys. A couple of girls, too. Like, really, really cool people. They were, I don't know. I don't want to be mean. Small towns are small towns, right? And people who don't look or act the same can sometimes be looked on as different and weirdos. These would be the weirdos. They were called, I don't even know why. Well, I do know why, but it's a weird name. They were called the hair flippers. So these were, my friends were like Javin and Byron and Spencer and Chris and other Chris. And Chris's older brother James came back from his mission. And Spencer's older brother Dave came back from his mission a little while later. And there were quite a few others. Robert Keller, Sean Foster. Sean's awesome. He's gone on to really cool things. He's a good dude. Javin, again, like I said, his little brother Ben, quite a few other kids, Nate Roberts. And so just quite a few friends. And that was really cool to have that meet kind of a soft landing there. And then there were also people who were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, many of them, when they were younger than that, had been kind of pushing back against the strictures of their church, of their religion. But by this time, many of them were on their way back in, were finding their way back to faith. And I think that might be a product of really good young men leaders. So they were open about their faith. And then I made other friends who were kind of cursory friends. The nice thing about Kanab was that, that from my experience, at least, my thinning hair, was that there were cliques. There's no question that there were cliques, right? But they weren't terrible. And I didn't see a lot of bullying. There may have been bullying. I don't want to be completely ignorant, but I didn't see really any bullying. I saw kindness and I saw goodness and overall acceptance. But I guess there had been some rough edges for a little while. But, I was a weirdo. I had the interest in gaming, but I was also smart and interested in school and liked school, actually. So I actually made friends with some of those other people who were smart and liked school. So like Bill and Nate Roberts again, and Lori Wilcox and Aaron Cram and Kelly Pepper and quite a few other folks there. They became good friends in a couple of my classes. I was a writer and Lori was a writer and she wanted to write. And that was really cool. And then I also had a weight training class because I had no PE up to that point, really. The transcript that Jonathan, one of the cult people, made for me so that I could, start school. My hair's a total mess. That's funny. It reflected what the coursework I'd basically done, but I think it might have been somewhat generous. I was definitely the highest achiever at faith school in the cult because I was ticked off at them. So my grades were probably fairish, but I did very little math, and our PE was informal. Most of the classes were kind of informal. Some of the classes were actually quite rigorous, though, which is really good, and I thank Bridget and Jonathan for that. Any case, so I liked school, so I hung with those guys, and I had a weight training class in the morning, so I became friends with a bunch of the jocks as well. So I could be kind of with the jocks, I could be with the brains, and I could be with the weirdos, the hair flippers, and it was kind of cool. It felt, and they were all so warm and welcoming, and they seemed to enjoy my company of all crazy things. So I had a really soft landing in the small town of Kanab. Now, small towns have the stereotypes, and some of those stereotypes were true. I was the new kid, and so there may have been some suspicion of me from locals. I was from the cult people up the road, with the best friends and the animals and stuff. So there was probably a little bit more like, what's going on here? But there were a couple of my peers who were going to school at the same time. And so they, we were basically normal, a little weirder, I guess. But I had some really special experiences there. And mainly it was because of those nice, warm, welcoming people who just saw me as some guy who needed some friends. And for the first time in my life, these were friends. There were people who seemed to want to hang out with me. They took pleasure in my company. They reacted positively when I entered the room. I know that sounds weird to say it, but up until that point, there hadn't been people who would react positively when I walked into a room. Think about that. My kid walks into a room, I'm like, hey, buddy. And sometimes I'll even give him a little hug, side hug, full hug. After school, it's like, hey, it's good to see you. Happy voice, smile, meeting the eyeballs, a showing of love. How was school? Tell me about what was good and what was bad, stuff like that, and none of that before. So it was different to have people seem to like me. And it started to make me think a little bit more about, oh, maybe I'm not a complete outcast from society. Maybe I'm not completely useless or worthless. And that was a nice thing. That was a really nice thing. And of course, they started inviting me to church because they were on their journey and they saw another kid who was kind of lost, and they thought, well, let's have him come along on our journey. Let's see if there's something here for him. So they did invite me to church, right? And I said no. But they were low key, and they never pressured me or anything like that. I mean, I ultimately said yes to an invitation from Lori. I'm trying to think about why I said yes. It's not all that important why, but what's nice is that this was the second time I went. I went one time and it was super dull. I didn't know the songs, and it was just kind of boring. They passed around red bread and water and sang songs, and then random people from the congregation went up and spoke. What I was impressed by was that there wasn't ranting politically, which was nice, and they seemed to mean what they said about Jesus Christ. Now, at this point, I did not believe in God, right? And I'm going to get to that in just a quick second. But Lori invited me to church. I think it's kind of a weird thing to do, but I think it was because it was a testimony meeting. And maybe she had talked to the people in her home, that they were all going to bear their testimony that day because Jared was going to maybe come. So I said yes, out of friendship. And I went. And, I was sincerely impressed, I guess. It did make an impression on me that there were people who went up and bore sincere testimonies, and they were emotional, and it was clearly important to them what they were saying about their faith in Jesus Christ and his atonement and how much God loved them. That made an impression on cynical Jared, because remember, I grew up in a cult, right? And I grew up around people who didn't seem to care about my well-being. They didn't care about me in any real way that I could put together. The God they taught about, they certainly didn't emulate any kind of good features of a God. The cult had ultimately, by the time I was really paying attention to what they were saying, had basically kind of vanillaed, it's a verb, sure, into kind of a Christian, non-denominational, Christian sectarian type of thing, with a bit of pagan thrown in, I think, and some of their old cult stuff, like around Jesus and Jehovah and Lucifer. Anyway, but they taught a God who was angry. They taught a God who didn't love, but who punished. They taught a God who was exclusionary and elitist. And it just didn't make any sense to me. So I didn't believe in that God. I didn't believe in any God. I got out of the cult and I was like, I told my father the summer before we both were finally out, that I just didn't believe in God. I couldn't connect there being a God with reality. What I'd been taught made no sense. I didn't see how we would need a God. I felt like life was fine without a God. So I didn't believe in God. I said I was an atheist. Looking back with my today's eyes, I know that I was an agnostic. It doesn't matter, but the difference. But because of what came later, there is a difference, and it does matter, because I didn't believe in God, I said, but it's clear that I wished that I could, right? I had conversations with myself sometimes when I was a kid. God, if you're there, make this non-drinkable water from our terrible well drinkable. Nope. God, if you're there, let me be able to fly. Nope. Fun fact. For the first 18 or 20 years of my life, every time I saw, I still do it, never mind. Every time I see the first star of the night, every time, even today, I am 49 years old, guys. If I see the first star of the night, I will very quickly say, starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. I wish I may, I wish I might have this wish I wish tonight. I wish I could fly. I wrote a fun science fiction story based on that. Anyway, so God, if you're real, strike down Cyrus because he beat the crap out of me when I was 9, whatever. None of that happened. That's not how God works, right? So I didn't believe in God, but I clearly wanted to, looking back with my adult understanding eyes. So I was an agnostic, and I went to church and was impressed that these people truly did believe in their version of God. I had no desire to believe in God, and I was cynical and jaded about religion anyway, so I wasn't going to be like, oh, hallelujah, baptize me or anything like that. But it made an impression, and I still remember the image of Lori up there bearing her testimony, and a couple of other peers who lived with her, peers from school, people I knew sort of, and then some adults that I didn't know. So that was kind of a neat first impression of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A fun little tidbit was, I don't know, I was in Nathan Riddle's car when this happened. So if I was in Nathan Riddle's car, that means that we were doing A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, which was our competition play. I don't remember what time of year the competitions are. I think they're in fall, though. So it was probably only a month or two into my senior year. I'm in the front seat, squeezed between Nathan driving over here and some other person and another person squeezing in. There's like 4 of us in the front, 5 or 6 people squeezed and on laps in the back. And I said, okay, hang on a minute, guys. Who here is Mormon and who here is LDS? And they all burst out laughing. I didn't know, but it's a funny thing about us religionists, right? Or from any organization, really. We get our jargon and our dialect. And we don't always pay attention to the fact that not everybody hear or understands all the words we're using. So funny. They all laughed. I think it's a funny story. Whatever. So Nate was awesome, and he's going to be probably the focus of one of my upcoming episodes at this point. But all these friends, the invites to church, they were sincere. They clearly cared about me. They cared about my present at the time, and my future, and the journey that I was on. They took pleasure in my company. We played super cool games. I found that I shared similar values to a lot of these guys. Like I hadn't verbalized, or I don't know what the word is when it's in your head. I hadn't really kind of said it in my head, but at this point I was pretty firm that I probably shouldn't get involved in sex before marriage. Which is a good thing. I wasn't too interested in drinking, although I did. I just wasn't too interested in getting drunk or partying like maniac. I wasn't at all interested in drugs because my oldest brother Daniel had died deeply in direct connection to drugs. So I had no interest in drugs at all. So in any case, there were some interesting shared values, and we were very interested in fantasy and science fiction, and we were geeky about that cool stuff, and movies and then books in those areas. So we had those nice shared interests as well, and shared values in some ways too. So what a blessing to have those guys in my life. One quick story about one of those guys, and then, or about an experience I had with a few of them, and then I want to talk about their moms. That's right, their moms. Your mother. So I was pretty shy all the time growing up. I'm still actually a fairly shy person. Most people who I interact with don't see that and don't get that vibe, because I'm very good at setting it aside and letting the non-shy, letting the rest of me shine out. Because I need to, as part of my calling, as part of the work I've done. I love public speaking, and I'm really good at it. I still need to get a lot better at it, but good stuff. But I'm a shy guy. I'm an introvert. And my friends, Byron and Spencer and Chris, and maybe 1 or 2 others, maybe Sean actually was there too, dragged me to a dance. There were a lot of dances during my senior year at high school. They did a dance after, I think, most home home football games. Definitely homecoming. There was a prom. Didn't go to that. But, there were a lot of dances there. They loved them. So they dragged me to one after a football game. And I was usually with them anyway at the football game, because they were in the pep band. I didn't play any instruments, and I still don't play any instruments except for my throat. But that was where the fun was at the football games. I didn't really care about it. And then I got into it and started really liking football. Anyway, so they dragged me to a dance after. It was a lot of fun, but I just sat there. It was fun to watch these people, and fun to kind of watch the humanity, right? Like in Mean Girls when Lindsay Lohan's character shows up. And it's like, whoa, look at the wildlife. It's kind of like what I was doing. By this time, I'd already made the acquaintance of a couple of girls. Just the acquaintance. I had a lot more hair back then, guys. And you want to see a picture? Give me a quick second. Oh, no. Noisy. Sorry. I should have been more prepared. I'm sorry. Should have been more prepared. Okay. You ready for this? This is a picture. This is my senior picture. What the? Look at all that hair. Can you believe that stuff? That's a lot of hair, man. Anyway, I had a lot of hair. I was pretty good looking. So, you know what happened at that dance? I sat on a bench, and a pretty girl who I'd met named Annie came up and asked me to dance. She was cute and fun, and she had found me in a hallway during lunch one day not long before. And I had eaten my lunch and was sitting in a hallway just writing, because I was a loner. I was firmly in the loner business. She comes up and says, "Do you want to dance?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't dance." And she walked away, which is too bad. Whatever. I thought she was a knockout. And then another girl who's smoking, I forget her name though, came up and asked me to dance. I said no. 4 or 5 more girls asked me to dance at the slow songs. I said no to every single dang one. And my friends were like, "What are you doing? Dance with the girls." I was like, "No." And then they tried to get me out for the fast songs to just boogie. And I said no. And I was just in the shell. The second dance, girl comes up. "Want to dance?" I'm like, "No, I don't dance." I wanted to dance. I was so self-conscious and so uptight, so firmly in the shell of lonerness. Ultimately, a couple of really fun songs came on in quick succession, and my friends did this thing they called a bungalow, and they got to boogieing all around the room, just flailing, and they kept trying to get me to join them, and I kept saying no, 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 no. But they kept insisting, and finally one time Byron's like, "Dude, when are you going to say yes? Because you know you want to let go. You got to let go, man. You got to feel it. You got to let it flow through you, dude." And I was really tempted to do it, and I was really fighting the temptation, but also fighting the stupid voices in my head saying, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it." And I knew I really should. He kept after it. "Byron, you're such a knucklehead. But if you get to see this video, thank you for not giving up on dummy Jared and insisting that I get out there." I don't know if you understand what an important turning point that was for me, and how so much that's come after has really not hinged on it necessarily, but wouldn't have come as well or as quickly or as effectively later without that. You fought for me, dude. You were one of the first people to truly fight for me. So thank you. I really appreciate it, and I will never forget it. You're a good man. Anyway, so he got me up, and I got out there, and I took a few tries, but I finally let go and just kind of started letting go, and loved it. Loved just this bungalowing thing that they did. And the song was, "You're Unbelievable," right? Oh my gosh. By EMF, I think. What a memory. What a sweet, weird, bizarre hinge and turning point in my life. For it to be that song, doing a thing called bungalowing with a bunch of weirdos who I adored deeply. Anyway, so that was cool, and my friends were great. And their warmth and goodness was great, and it was interesting to see the ones who were in my grade graduate, turn 19 before too long, and go on missions. And then the younger ones in me graduate and approach their mission while I was, "What is going on?" type of thing, right? And I could not get away from the demonstrations of their faith. They were right there, everywhere. And I'm a very observant person. I'm going to see this stuff, right? So it was interesting to see it, and to see them dedicate their lives, such a large portion of their lives to that point. I mean, it's a tenth of your life at that age, more than a tenth of your life at that age, to go serve this mission thing, often in a foreign land, and sometimes not in a foreign land, was interesting. So definitely kept making an impression on me. And that was very sweet. What a blessing. You know, for best friends, for the foundation to buy the property north of Kanab to set up Best Friends, so that eventually my father would leave them and move into Kanab because he was a firefighter and he built a life down in Kanab, so that I could eventually move in with him and have these exact people be in my life, who, and this wide variety of people be in my life, who were interested in me and interested in my welfare. What a grace. What a blessing that is. I can see his footprints. I can see his handprints and all of that. And I'm so grateful for it. But now I have to try not to get emotional, because I'm going to talk about my friends' moms. And my sister's friend's mom. So first we'll start with Bev. Emma had a best friend named Lindsay Willis. And her parents, Bev and Niall, just doted on my sister and her parents, my mom, my dad and stepmom. And thus, they learned about me, they met me, they thought the world of me, and Bev and Niall were the warmest, welcomingest, first demonstration I ever saw of a family. Like a real, functional family with a focus on faith and a culture of faith and family. And they weren't perfect, but they were industrious and loving and warm. And Bev was just so sweet, and I love her dearly. And I'm so grateful to Bev and Niall for their warmth and hospitality, for that first look I saw of what a family could be in faith. Yeah. Then Byron had a mom named Cherry and a dad named Brent. Brent was a taciturn, gruff-sounding guy who was also very sweet and very good and warm. He's a rough cowboy type, big mustache. What a good man. Not a perfect family either. Real challenges with that in their family. But Cherry was relentlessly warm to me. I was in Byron's house more than in any other house of my friends' houses. And it was certainly because Cherry was so welcoming. She must have made some sort of intentional decision and choice to say, my son is one of the weirdos. I love him. I love him for that. His friends are also some of the weirdos, and they might feel outcast. I'm going to make sure they have a home, a place, a safe place. And she let Byron express himself in astonishing ways. He drew and wrote all over his bedroom walls. It was really cool. He had a fun room and a sweet, sweet feeling in that home. That's the house I went to after my farewell, right before my mission. We all convened at Byron's house because that was the hub, it felt like. Cherry Owens, she passed of cancer way too young. And what a loss. But what a blessing heaven has. But boy, what a loss. I know Noah was gutting for Byron, and I know Heavenly Father feels your pain, brother. Your healing is still available through the grace of God. But Cherry changed my life with her warmth and her goodness. Being able to see what mothers could be. It was hard because I didn't have it from my own mother. But for some blessing, graceful, lucky, beautiful thing, I didn't dwell on it. I later had to process that and come to terms with that, which is important. But at the time, I was just like, this is so great. They would feed us sometimes. They would make sure we had a place to be. We went to Spencer's house sometimes kind of a lot. I actually listened to really good music there. Played some D&D there as well. I rode three-wheelers in the back in his big backyard, with a ravine and everything with him. Sucked at it, but I got a little better as I went. There was the Mosdell's home, which we didn't spend a lot of time in, but it was beautiful and lovely with Chris Mosdell and later his older brother James. And they all had sisters who were mostly pretty cute, actually, who've gone on to some of their own lives and made their own choices and are marking their journeys with determination and will, and I'm impressed by them. They showed me mothers. And then, of course, there was Susan, my own stepmom. Not healthy. She was never well, never very healthy. She smoked like a chimney. But she was funny and sarcastic and good to me and warm to me. Not overly affectionate or anything like that. I wouldn't have minded some of that. I was very affection-starved. But she had no hesitation about letting this weird guy in her home, who she really didn't know very well, right? And yeah, she was great. She was patient. She was good to me and very sweet. And I never called her mom. I don't think that was our relationship, but she was definitely like a mother to me. The only person I've ever called mom in my life has been my wife's mother. She's it. She's been the closest thing I've really had to a mother because of, my marriage and stuff to her wonderful daughter, my favorite person in the world. So I mentioned, and Spencer's mom was wonderful. She's a sweet lady. I went to her funeral a few years ago. It's good to see some of my friends there at that time. Javin and Ben's mom, Jane, this larger than life warmer than warm, sweet, obviously brilliant and uber talented, incredible woman raising a bunch of kids who were unbelievably talented. And she was so welcoming to us in her home. And there was always music being played in her home at all volumes. And it was not always great music. But she was just so tolerant and patient with it all. Because she had a family centered on faith. And a family focused on family. That was the priority. Getting this view into what families could be was 100% powerful and formative for me. And what a beautiful grace that was. From the starvation of my childhood, from the absolute skewed life that they were trying to build, to look at all these great families doing family things. The cult I grew up in, one of their early tenets was that families were obsolete, that family relationships were unnecessary, and they could be turned away from. In fact, you'd be more productive if you turned from the traditionalist family thing. Don't get married or anything like that. You've got to do your own thing, right? Or whatever, because they're all British, right? Tim Wiley, I know this because I experienced it, but also Tim Wiley, he's one of the original founders as well. He wrote a book called Love, Sex, Fear, Death about the cult. And really the cult before I was born and aware of it, right? When it was the process. And he also was in this documentary called Sympathy for the Devil, ? The True Story of the Process Church, or something like that, directed by Neil Edwards, I believe. We're friends on Facebook. Anyway, there's a quote in his book and also in the documentary where, he says that families were obsolete in their mind. There was no reason for families. The cult and the people there would raise the kids. And he also absolutely dismissively scorned the idea of family. He was glad he'd had a more meaningful life than that. Tim, I'm not your judge. That will be Heavenly Father, and Jesus Christ will be your mediator. But I can't help but know and express that I'm glad that you were able to find your own meaning. But when it comes to a meaningful life, I don't know what metric you're using. If the metric is make the world a better place, I can tell you that people who raise families are making the world a better place, better, much more than you and your cult was, or ever did. Absolutely a better place. People, a husband and a wife, a mother and a father who raise their kids in love and in faith and with the knowledge of Jesus Christ as their Savior and Redeemer. They're making the world a better place, much more than that cult was, because they're raising people of, integrity and who have a mind for making the world a better place and lifting other people as much as they can and serving and ministering to other people and actually helping a community of people, not joining a commune and cutting yourself off from the world. I'm sorry. So I can't tell what metric you could possibly think that kind of life is more meaningful than, say, my life. But again, God will judge you lovingly and mercifully. And you and the other founders who've passed, such as Faith and other folks, have learned because they've passed. My mother, of course, too. Know better now, I hope. Anyway, I am grateful for the graces that started to be a part of my life, that as I look back, I cannot help but be very emotional about it and see a loving God preparing me for what was to come in my own life as I said yes to him as often and as much as I could. I want you to know that there's much more to tell. There's much more joy. But if you will keep a positive outlook, if you will keep an optimistic outlook, you're going to have a much better chance yourself at finding the beauty in life and the grace in life and the grace of our God in heaven, and activating some of that beautiful grace for you in your own life through the atonement of Jesus Christ. I would not be here without the bad, followed by the good of Kanab and my friends and their wonderful, beautiful mothers and fathers, especially their moms. What a magnificent thing. For my farewell talk, I gave it on Mother's Day. My mother was in the congregation, and I talked about my friends' moms. I don't think I hurt her feelings. If I did, I'm sorry, Mom, Magdalene, up in the spirit world. But they were examples of beautiful moms, amazing moms that changed my life and showed me that my dream of a family with lots of kids was going to for sure come to pass once I started realizing that it could be done through God's plan. So, alrighty. Thanks for being with me. Appreciate you watching. And if you made it all the way through this episode, I truly appreciate it even more. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts and input on today's topic as well. And you can feel free to contact me with questions and suggestions for topics. You can contact me at the Gmail that I say in every show, and it's below in the description as well. It's morningintodancing@gmail.com, MOURNING into dancing@gmail.com. Until next time, as always, sit back, take a quiet moment, and find the beauty and grace in the world. Find the beauty and grace in the world. Look at some mountains. Take a minute to hear the wind in the trees. Yeah. And then find some of that beauty and grace in yourself. Thanks for watching.